Hi, everyone, and welcome to the third episode of my web series, That's a Wrap. For this episode, I wanted to talk to you about a really important year in film history, 1950. Now, this was a year when so many classic and indelible films were released, and particularly today, I wanted to talk about three of them because they're three really fantastic films that feature really fantastic female characters with great iconic performances by three really legendary actresses. And the first film is Sunset Boulevard. This film was really unique in the way that it kind of shattered the myths that people had about Hollywood. You know, before this, the Hollywood in movies was kind of displayed as this really, wonderful place that, that you could go and be successful in, as long as you had the dreams and determination, and as long as you dreamed hard enough, anything was possible and anything could happen for you there. But Sunset Boulevard really kind of changed all that. It presented a more realistic look at Hollywood, in part thanks to its terrific script and its really fantastic performances by its two stars, William Holden, but more in particular, Gloria Swanson. She played this kind of faded film star from the 1920s, the silent era, who kind of just, as time went on, she faded into obscurity and she gave this really brilliant, leveled, and nuanced performance about someone who's so desperate to reclaim the former glory that they once had at almost really any cost. The truth in that performance, it, in some ways it was campy, but it was honest camp. You believed everything in every scene and what she wanted, and it has some of some of the things in common with all these films. Some of the most classic dialogue ever written for film, which with this one, if you've seen the movie, I'm sure you remember the very final scene that after Gloria Swanson, after she's well, I won't give that away because that'd be a spoiler, those of you that have not seen it. Anyway, for those of you that have, the final scene when she's coming down the staircase and she ends in from the camera and she kind of approaches it, in the daze that she is in after what she's just done, and does this weird gesture with her hands and kind of looks out into the camera and says, the classic film line, "I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille." Yeah, what a chilling ending. What a, just a truthful look at an industry that really, until this film, had really been romanticized into something that it was, but also something that it wasn't. This business, the entertainment industry, Hollywood, whatever it's not, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it doesn't reward those who dream the hardest. Yeah, and this film really kind of changed that. The second film from 1950, legendary film, is Born Yesterday. I really enjoyed this movie. I enjoy it for so many reasons. Number one, because it introduced me to my favorite actress, which was Judy Holliday. Here we have Judy Holliday being able to recreate for film the role that she originated on stage in 1946 that she played for over 1,000 performances. Now, interesting enough, when it came time to make this movie, Judy Holliday was not the first choice. I think the powers that be, thought that she was okay to do it on stage, but I guess for the film, they wanted someone a little bit more well-known because it was reported that up until this time, it was the highest price that a studio ever paid for the rights to a film, $1 million. So they had they had a big investment lined up and they wanted to be sure that they got a return. So, they thought, she was known in New York in theater circles, but for a mainstream movie, maybe not so much. So they really considered, I think, upwards of 30 actresses, including Lucille Ball. But, however, thanks to a really creative screen test on the part of Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn, I believe, as the story goes, she had seen Judy Holliday play the role on Broadway, and in her mind, there was really no one else who could really do that role justice on screen and really give it what it needed. So she arranged with famed director George Cukor to build up a part in the movie that they were doing together and give that to Judy, and kind of to show the studio heads at Paramount what she could do and what she was capable of. And it worked, and she got the role. And out of all these, out of that year, she went on to win the Best Actress Oscar for her performance. And it's kind of, for me, being such a big fan of hers, it's kind of frustrating because a lot of people say that it was undeserving, and I don't really agree with that. It was a comedy, and I think that's the beef that people have about this. It's like, oh, you can't win an Oscar for, what is, I guess, marketed as a comedy, but it's so much more. Judy Holliday played this immortal character of Billy Dawn, but in the less capable actress, it could have been one layered in, no nuances, but she gave this person a heart and a soul and made her real. That I think, all these performances by these actresses in the 1950s, in the 1950s, what we're talking about, were fantastic, but, I think the Oscar was well-deserved that year to go to Judy Holliday. I mean, it was a tough choice, but, it's kind of frustrating when people say that she didn't deserve it. The third film from 1950 was All About Eve. This one was starred Bette Davis, and this is another backstage story in the same sense that Sunset Boulevard was. Whereas Sunset Boulevard was a backstage story about the film industry, this was a backstage story about theater in New York City and Broadway. And one of the things that's really great specifically about this is because it showed women, in a different light. Usually in film, in this era, women were depicted as, secondary, as passive, as demure. But with this film, the women in this movie were strong and fearless and bold and determined and, calculating. They knew what they wanted, and they knew what they had to do to get what they wanted. This really was the first film to show women in a new light. I mean, one could even argue that it, was a front runner to the women's liberation movement that, began, 10 years later in the 60s. All three of these films, what they have in common is strong central female characters. Kind of like I said for the characters in All About Eve, these women were strong. They weren't weak. They did not play second fiddle to a man. They weren't housewives. They were, they had goals and ambitions and dreams that they wanted to accomplish. And I think in that respect, they were right on time, but also in some ways ahead of their time, because I don't think America had quite caught up to it yet, as they would in a couple more years. So that, in my opinion, is what made these what made these films so lasting and such staying power that, here even, over 60 years later, they are still regarded, and rightly so, as film classics. These three films that were released in the year 1950, the staying power is timeless, thanks to the performances, thanks to the writing, thanks to the directing. It's just like sometimes, you know, in movies, you know, you go to see a movie, or there are certain movies that all of the elements kind of come together and create, you know, this wonderful final product that stands the test of time, as these films do. All right, that is it for this episode. I thank you guys so much for watching, and yeah, stay tuned.